Tommy Jaggi of Fansided here with NFL expert Marcus Mosher to talk about NFL football week 7 wrapping up. Marcus, we're going to examine some of these teams and do a fun little segment today on which teams are contenders and who are pretenders before we reach the halfway point of the season here. We're going to talk about Raiders running back Ashton Jeanty. Was that a vast overreach draft pick at this point? Justin Fields has had 2 terrible games, ended up getting benched. We'll talk about him. And then a surprise trade candidate potentially as well. So stick around for that. So Marcus, overall thoughts as we wrap up week 7 here.
I mean, I hate to keep going back to this point because I know we belabored it quite a bit, but it's shocking how much further ahead the NFC is than the AFC at this point. On the year, I believe the NFC is up 22-11. And you feel it in these conferences. You have 13 teams in the NFC who are at least 500, right? You've got, I think everybody's within 2 games of the number 1 seed in the conference. And it's just going to be a bloodbath over the next 2 months as we try to get to the playoffs in the NFC. And in the AFC, we kind of know who the 6 playoff teams are. We're still trying to figure out the 7th. And you've got probably 6 of the worst teams in the AFC are all at the bottom of this. Or sorry, 6 of the worst teams in the NFL are all in the AFC. And that's 38% of the conference. I think it's a trend that's going to continue. It doesn't mean it's always going to continue year in and year out. It's just one of those years where the NFC seems like it's a lot stronger overall than the AFC.
It is odd, and it's not unusual to see the NFC look stronger overall. Is this an ownership thing, Marcus? Like, how much of this is ownership? Because it seems like a lot of those same teams that just have trouble getting out of the basement there.
Yes. I mean, there are some teams that you can point to that have bad owners, whether that's the Jets or the Browns, and we'll see about the Titans ownership. That's one I'm looking at. The Raiders are another one. I think it's also, you have a lot of really good quarterbacks in the AFC, Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. And when those quarterbacks are hurt or they're not playing well, the rest of the rosters are kind of exposed. And that's what's happening to a team like the Ravens, right? Lamar Jackson gets hurt. They can't compete at all. The Chargers, they've got a healthy Justin Herbert, but the roster is so bad around him that if Herbert has a bad game, they get blown out. And that's what's happening in the AFC. Whereas the NFC, they might not have top to bottom the best quarterbacks, but the rosters are just so much more consistent and deeper. And that's how a team like Seattle, who I don't even know if it's going to make the playoffs or not. I mean, they're 5-2 right now. They just have this unbelievable roster around Sam Darnold, and they're playing fantastic football.
It's such a weird outlook in the NFC in particular, Marcus, because there are so many teams that are 5-2. And oddly enough, the Packers sit atop the conference at 4-1-1, but a bunch of 5-2 teams after them. It's really anybody's game. And I think that's what makes it so exciting here. So let's talk about this, Marcus. Contenders or pretenders? We're going to go one team at a time. We got a handful here to dissect, but I want to see what you think. And let's start with the Jacksonville Jaguars. This team has looked really good at times, and then they've looked really awful at times as well. So they are coming off of a terrible 35-7 home loss against the LA Rams. It's a good opponent that they played. They did not show up for this game. Trevor Lawrence, 48 pass attempts, failed to get to 300 yards, had 1 touchdown, 6.2 yards an attempt, and a 13 QBR in this game. Marcus, are the Jaguars pretenders or are they contenders?
We should say that this game that they played against the Rams, technically a home game. It was in London. Jacksonville does have a lot of fans in London, yes. But I think I lean pretenders because this defense has been so reliant on turnovers through the first 6 weeks of the season, 7 weeks, where I think they're like the number 5 overall defense right now. At least going into week 7 by DVOA. But if you take away the turnovers, they're like 25th. And this is something to kind of remember going forward. If you have a defense that creates a lot of turnovers, that's awesome. That's always good. You want to win the turnover battle. But it can also cover up maybe a defense that's not quite as good as they appear. And you saw that against the Rams. Like, they just couldn't get any takeaways. Matthew Stafford shredded them without Puka Nacua, in that game. So I still think Jacksonville is a good bet to make the playoffs, but they're just not a team that I would be overly concerned about if I were an AFC contender.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you play overseas, a lot of fluky things can happen. Mm-hmm. We've seen that. But to put up 7 points in this game, despite rushing for nearly 100 yards, I mean, you had 400 total yards of offense almost in this contest. But what I think is the stat that sticks out the most to me, Marcus, is that Matthew Stafford had a better QBR than Trevor Lawrence did a passer rating. So Stafford had a 76.9 QBR. Trevor Lawrence had a 74.7 passer rating, which we know can go all the way up to 158.3. It's just bad. Like, are you buying into Trevor Lawrence? Like, we're at that stage. We're in year 5. You've got to see, is he the guy that's going to take them to the next level? Obviously, he had the really good playoff game a couple years ago, scored 31 points in the second half against the Chargers.
Yep.
Since then, it's like, what are you getting out of this guy?
So I think Lawrence had a rough game overall against the Rams, but I don't think his receivers did him any favors. I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. just looks like a shell of himself right now.
And what happened, Mark? Like, he looked so good as a rookie.
He looked really good as a rookie. In this game, I think they're trying to use him in different ways. They're trying to use him more underneath and over the middle of the field, and he's just not built to be that type of receiver. And again, he had a couple big drops in this game that would have moved the chains, and they just don't have the guy, especially now with Brenton Strange out, that can move the chains on third down. Like, they've got these two unbelievable athletes in Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr., but they just don't have that one reliable receiver that gets open on 3rd and 6. And that's where they really need like a Jacoby Myers type of receiver, and they just don't have that. So I think if you get rid of some of those drops, you keep these drives going, you get out of these 3rd and 11, 3rd and 12 situations that Jacksonville was in all game long, I think he looks better. But again, Lawrence did not play well, but I still think I'm buying him overall being the right quarterback for Jacksonville.
All right. I mean, in the AFC outlook, would I be shocked if Jacksonville made the playoffs? Absolutely not. Are they contenders? Certainly not at this point. I think it's really hard to say that with just how high variance they've been. They're a young roster. They've got a young coaching staff. Maybe they can get there. Right now, though, they don't resemble a team that looks like they can actually compete once they get in the postseason. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah. Yes, I would. I mean, in general, but again, if they're playing like Denver in round 1 of the playoffs and Denver wins the AFC West, which I think they could do, would it shock me if Jacksonville wins a playoff game? Absolutely not. So I think it just depends. Like, we think Jacksonville can make the playoffs? We think they could potentially win a playoff game. But let's be clear, this isn't like a great team or anything like that. They're not a legit Super Bowl contender. And that's what we're really talking about here is because the AFC is so weak, somebody's going to get that 6th seed, somebody's going to get that 7th seed, but we don't trust this team at all.
Yeah, certainly. And so if we define the term contender as, do you have a shot to get there? Do you have a shot to make it to the Super Bowl and win? I would say certainly no. Do they have a shot to make the playoffs? Absolutely yes, in a wide open AFC. Marcus, let's move on and talk about the LA Chargers here, a team that I was admittedly high on before the start of the season. I thought they had a couple of strong games early on, and then they kind of come back down to earth here. Obviously, you're missing your offensive tackles. That certainly doesn't help. Maybe Joe Alt will be coming back here soon, and that can give them a big boost on offense. But this team just lacks star power overall. They lack names on defense. They've got a franchise quarterback, I think. I still like Jim Harbaugh. I don't know if maybe he works in today's NFL as well as he did even a decade ago when he was the coach of the 49ers. So I don't know what to make of this team yet. You watch Justin Herbert sling the ball for 420 yards and 3 touchdowns, made a couple costly mistakes in this game that really had an impact, but you lose by multiple scores at home to the Colts, who are admittedly a good team, but are the Chargers contenders, Marcus, after what we've witnessed the past few weeks?
No, and it's not because of the offense, because I do think they're going to get Joe Alt back. They're going to get Trey Pipkins back. O'Marion Hampton's going to be back probably in the next month or so. So I think you'll get him back by Thanksgiving. Let's say that. So I think the offense can give you 24, 27 points per game. It's the defense. And this was a defense last year that was really, really good despite not having a lot of big names. And that hasn't been the case this year. 38 points to the Colts. Looking back at it, they played in week 6. They played the Dolphins. They gave up 27 points in that game. Look at how Miami played last week against Cleveland. And it's hard to get excited about that defense. 2 weeks ago, they played the Commanders in Los Angeles, and the Commanders ran for like 250 yards on them in that game. So I think this Chargers defense is taking a big step backward. The offense is still good, but not good enough to overcome that defense. I'm kind of out on the Chargers right now unless they get a lot healthier and something changes. I just don't see it.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. The big factor, the defense. If they continue to play that the way that they have been, they're not going to be able to compete. That offense isn't doing enough to overcome their deficiencies on that side of the football. I'm not out on them completely. I think that they have some of the most important pieces in place. You get Joe Alt back. You've got a franchise quarterback. The passing game is at least there. We know that that's the case. You got to play better on defense. Right now, I would say that they are pretenders with a chance to be contenders if they can turn things around here. Maybe they're one of those teams that try to make a move before the deadline. I don't know what direction they're going to go there, but they're struggling for sure.
Yeah, and they do have some guys that should come back from injury on defense. But even then, like I would be making a move if I was the Chargers, because this is the year with the AFC being so weak to go out and try to win a couple playoff games. And if you got one or two more starters on defense, maybe that's all you need to steady the ship a little bit, because otherwise you're just going to waste a year of Justin Herbert playing at a really high level.
All right, Marcus, let's move on and talk about the Denver Broncos in what was such a wild game. I mean, their win probability at one point is down to 1%. Like, there's no way they should have come back and beat the Giants. And if it had not been for a failed 2-point conversion, a missed extra point, like that game should have been in the books. Denver comes back and wins that game in dramatic fashion, 33-32. They advanced to 5-2 on the season. Now, this is a team that we really talked up their defense last year. They've been a little inconsistent so far this season. They've got a lot of players on defense. They've got youth on defense. Offensively, they had a player who was in Rookie of the Year contention last year in Bo Nix. Hasn't quite looked the same this year. Offensive firepower is hit or miss. Like, what do you make of this Broncos team?
I have no idea. I honestly, I think the defense is very good. So I think this Giants game was a little bit of a fluke. Some of the scores that the Giants got in this one were just so wonky. And so I don't want to take too much out of this game. I am more concerned about the offense, because the offense did absolutely nothing in 3 quarters against this game. Last week against the Jets, they scored 13 points, and I believe 2 of those points came on a safety. Bo Nix did absolutely nothing against the Jets. They sacked Justin Fields 9 times, and they did nothing with it. They got down 17-0 against Philadelphia the week before. They put up only 20 points against the Chargers earlier in the season. They barely beat the Titans earlier in the year. And having said all that, they play the Cowboys this weekend, which means they're going to score 35 points. So I'm criticizing their offense, knowing full well they're just about to go on an absolute tear. I just feel like watching this offense, Tommy, it's everything has to be schemed open, and it's a bunch of screens and little touches to Marvin Mims. And hey, let's get Evan Ingram on a rub route to try to get him making plays after the catch. And I think Sean Payton does a good job of scheming things open, but you also have to scheme everything open because of the lack of weapons on this offense. And when you watch these games, it's just so apparent that they could really benefit from like a go-to number 1 receiver that they just run their offense through, because everything seems so hard right now. And having said all that, I think they're probably going to be the 2 or 3 seed in the AFC. I think they're going to win the AFC West because their schedule is so soft. I don't know. I just give up. I give up.
They've got a really soft schedule coming up. You said it. And Marcus, the last 2 weeks, they could have lost to both of those New York teams. We could be talking about an entirely different Broncos team right now. But you talked about their receivers. I mean, you got kind of an aged out Cortland Sutton who can't get a lot of separation, Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, Evan Ingram. There's nobody that moves the needle for me at all. It's like, is this a team? Maybe now you're sitting on a 5-2 record. AFC's wide open. Maybe this should be a team that goes out and try to get a weapon, because who do you trust in this offense? And I think it's one of the most top to bottom, one of the most underwhelming like skill sets, group of skill players in the league, maybe right now even.
I 100% agree. Of all the teams we're going to talk about, this is the team that feels like they could be one piece away. If you add a significant weapon on offense with that defense, with Sean Payton, I think there's a chance that Denver's, I think they're a game and a half back from the 1 seed right now in the AFC. if they were to get the 1 or 2 seed, I don't think anybody was going to want to go to Denver in January and try to play there. But I keep coming back to who's the name that could be available that could really flip things for Denver, because you go through these rosters and there's just not very many of those receivers out there that teams are going to trade that could really move the needle. But I think if it becomes available, I do think Denver should go for it.
Yeah, and as a Steelers fan, Marcus, maybe Pittsburgh should have held on to George Pickens for how many wide receiver needy teams there are right now. Maybe you could have gotten more. Probably wouldn't have the same production as he does in Dallas, on pace for an amazing season. So wouldn't have been the case either way. Let's talk about the Washington Commanders here. And man, a team that just jumped out of nowhere last year with Dan Quinn, with the rookie of the year, offensive player of the year, and Jaden Daniels. They're coming down to earth. And in fact, I think they're crashing back down to earth. This does not look like the same team to me. I'm worried that opponents have Jaden Daniels figured out. It's a lot of that one read offense. And when that read's not open, what do you do after that? He doesn't run like Lamar Jackson. I mean, he's fast, but he's not that level of a runner. The defense is old. The team is old. Yeah. And you're lacking star power. It's really hard for me to get excited about this group. And you talked about another one that I'm not particularly fond of, the skill players. That's the Commanders as well. And so you got an old tight end, you got a 7th round rookie running back who's good, but it's like, what does this team have going for them? Because originally we thought it was going to be Jaden Daniels. And even then he's kind of just an average quarterback so far this year.
Yeah, and in fairness to Daniels, he's been dealing with a couple different injuries. He had the knee injury early in the year that he suffered week 2 against Green Bay, and then now he's got the hamstring injury. Terry McLaurin has hardly played at all after signing his new deal due to a quad injury. Deebo Samuel didn't play this week because of a heel injury. Noah Brown, who's their number 3 receiver, he was out. Luke McCaffrey got banged up in this game. So I think for almost any team, if you lose your top 4 receivers, you're just not going to be able to function on offense. So I don't want to blame Jaden Daniels too much. I think the offense will be okay once they start to get pieces back. It's the defense that's the concern, because they are incredibly old. And this is where you and I talked about this offseason. I didn't understand the strategy of Washington loading up on older players, whether it was going out and trading for Tunsil or signing Von Miller or bringing back Bobby Wagner. They kept leaning into these older veterans thinking that was going to help them get over the hump. And now we're halfway through the season and they're easily the slowest team in the NFL.
Yeah.
I think the Commanders are in huge trouble. I think they're the 3rd best team in the NFC East, and there's only going to be one playoff team coming out of that division. So I think that the Commanders are pretenders. And unfortunately, I think it was pretty easy to see it coming when they had a much more difficult schedule than what they had last year.
Yeah, and Marcus, I think they had a direction to pick. Are you going to build a young roster around your young quarterback, or are you going to try to win now? I mean, there were a 12-win team that made the playoffs, won a playoff game last year. They probably thought that they were close enough to getting the job done, but in turn, it ended up being a big move backwards, because you just can't be that old. You can't be that old anymore and compete and keep up with these teams. And if it looks this bad already, and I know this as a Steelers fan, they got an old defense too. If it looks this bad already, I don't know what it's going to look like by the end of the season. We could be talking about a defense that looks much worse.
And we should mention, one of the concerns about Dan Quinn being a defensive-minded head coach is that when he faces good quarterbacks, the defense tends to get shredded a little bit. And that's why if you look back, I think 9 of their last 18 games, they've given up 30 or more points. That is a lot of points for a guy who is a defensive guru or defensive-minded coach. And now with Dorrance Armstrong, your best player, out for the year with a knee injury, I think that unit could be in big trouble. They've got a very difficult schedule coming up, including a game this week on Monday night against Kansas City. They still have 2 games left against Philadelphia. I think it could be it's getting late early for Washington.
Yeah. And Marcus, 2 weeks until the trade deadline. I know that teams don't want to bow out early, but if you're the Commanders right now, like if you're running that organization, which direction are you going? Are you buying or selling?
I mean, probably sell, but the problem is they just don't have very many pieces to sell. Like Terry McLaurin just signed a new deal. They traded for Deebo Samuel this offseason. I don't think anybody wants Deebo's contract. Again, Dorrance Armstrong was your best asset on defense, and he's now out for the year. I just think you're in a hold situation where you acknowledge that the season didn't go the way that you wanted it to, and you run it back in year 3 with Jaden Daniels, hopefully getting a little bit younger.
Yeah, and if you're a Commanders fan, you are excited about Jaden Daniels, but you are probably pretty pessimistic about the rest of the roster.
Yeah.
Just not a lot of other pieces to build around outside of that. We'll see how things go from here. Let's talk about the Chicago Bears now, Marcus, who, again, I think that they've shown signs of life, but also they've struggled to kind of hold on against subpar opponents at times. They had the really good offensive performance against Dallas. They've been somewhat of a roller coaster ride, and that's to be expected when you have pretty high variance Caleb Williams at the helm right now. I'm super optimistic about Ben Johnson's offense overall, but are they there yet? And I think that that's the question. In a crowded NFC with so many 5-win teams already through the first 7 weeks of the season, are they going to be in a good enough position? And they sit on a 4-2 record, by the way, had their bye. Are they going to be in good enough position to be in that wild card hunt? Do you buy them as a contender yet?
I do, because this is the number one team in the league in explosive plays. They can really run the ball. And I think that's the thing that's so encouraging about this Bears team. Over the last 4 games, which they've won all 4 of them, they've been just killing teams on the ground. And we know that's a Ben Johnson staple when he was with Detroit, is they're going to be balanced on the ground. And even someone like Kyle Monangai now is starting to really rack up the yards on the ground with DeAndre Swift. The passing game is still creating a lot of chunk plays. I think they are going to get Roman Duze and Luther Bird more involved as the season goes on, along with Colston Loveland. The defense has actually been surprisingly good. And I think with Dennis Allen, who I think is one of the best defensive coordinators in the league, I think this defense is only going to get better. If I were a team in the NFC, I don't want to see Chicago, because this is a team that's got a bunch of weapons. They've got a good offensive line, and they've got a coaching staff that wants to be aggressive. I am buying the Bears as contenders.
I think I'm with you on that. I saw that your tweet that you posted out, top of the league pretty easily in their explosive plays, their big plays between rushes and passes so far. You can see the Ben Johnson effect already in this game against the Saints. 40 carries for 222 yards. That's 5.6 yards a carry. 2 touchdowns, one by Swift, one by Monangai. It's coming together. It's really coming together. And I think that it's only going to get better. This offense is so young, the skill players and the quarterback in particular, and it's only going to get better as the season goes on if they can stay healthy. I think that there's no reason to expect less of them. They're going to be in that race. Do I think that they win the division? Definitely not with the Packers and the Lions. But can they be a wild card team? I think they can, and maybe they can make a splash. You catch them on the right day, they've got a pretty explosive offense.
And that's the thing, is I think this offense is only going to get better, and they're already putting up a bunch of points. I think you're just starting to see the tip of the iceberg here. And more often than not, with these teams like the Bears, these up and coming teams, they end up popping way faster than anybody realizes. Like a good example is like the Ravens in 2019 with Lamar Jackson, right? That was Lamar Jackson's second year. All of a sudden, they're the number 1 seed in the AFC. Not saying Chicago is going to get there, but I just won't be surprised if we get to the end of the year. Chicago's 11-6. They're the 5 seed or the 6 seed, and we see them in a big playoff game. So I am buying Chicago.
I'm buying them as well. Let's move on and talk about the Carolina Panthers, a team that surprisingly has a winning record right now. We knew that the NFC South was somewhat wide open there. They are 4-3. But Marcus, some of the context matters here. They just played a road game against the New York Jets. They won by a score in a game where Justin Fields was benched because he had 46 yards on 12 attempts. They sacked him 3 times. They sacked Tyrod Taylor 3 times. So credit to their defense, obviously, for helping make that happen. But Bryce Young is coming off a game where he was 15 of 25, 138 yards. That's 5.5 yards an attempt. I thought he was maybe better than the stats would have indicated, but you're narrowly escaping some of these games against bottom dwelling opponents. Is that good enough to convince you that this team is a contender, or are we still looking at a pretender?
It's tough because they're 3-0 at home, and their offense is putting up a ton of points at home. 30 against Atlanta, 27 against Miami, 30 against Dallas, and they can run the ball. And usually I'm pretty bullish on these teams that can run the ball. And they ran the ball really well this week with Rico Dowdle and with Chuba Hubbard coming back. I think if Bryce Young were healthy, I would buy them a little bit, because the offense has been pretty good. The defense can get plays done with J.C. Horn and Derek Brown. But With Bryce Young now dealing with a high ankle injury, it sounds like he's going to miss at least the next 2 games. Their next 2 games, Tommy, Buffalo, Green Bay. That seems like they're destined to lose those games. And now you're back to 4-5 with a really hard schedule coming up. I don't think this is a bad team at all because Bryce Young has been able to have some of these big games, and because this offensive line is mauling people. I just don't think they're quite there yet. I think they're about 1 more year away from really challenging the Bucs in the NFC South.
I think they're pretenders, but it's unfortunate that Bryce got injured because I wanted to see him. This would have been the perfect test. You play home against the Bills and at the Green Bay Packers these next 2 weeks. If they could have hung with those teams, maybe they could have changed my mind. But Marcus, the teams they played early in the season, Jaguars, Cardinals, Falcons, Patriots, Dolphins, Cowboys, and Jets. They haven't exactly gone against the cream of the crop. They have 3 losses in that cluster. I'm not buying this team. I think that they're still lacking star power. I think that they've got some decent young players to get excited about. JC Horn has come alive. They've got some good players on defense. I think Tet's going to be a good wide receiver for them, but they're not there yet. And I think that they're, pretty easily a worse version of the Bears that we just talked about. I just don't think that they're going to be there. And I would be really surprised even in their division if they finish with a winning record by the end of the year.
Yeah. And again, because of the Bryce Young injury, now that Andy Dalton's set to be their starter, that's really going to mess things up because I did like the way this team is playing. And you look at that Atlanta game that happened a couple weeks ago. They smoked Atlanta 30-0. Atlanta plays Buffalo a couple of weeks later and they go and they beat Buffalo. So I do think Carolina can hang with some of these better teams, but not without Bryce Young. Andy Dalton had a fine career. He's not even a capable backup at this point in his career.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty big loss.
All right, Marcus, we got one more here. That's the Atlanta Falcons, a team that has looked awesome at times and a team that it has not shown up to play in some of these games, which is the case with some of the teams that we're talking about here. They beat the Bills in week, what was that? Just last
week 6. Yeah. Honestly, the game was way bigger of a disparity than what the final score.
It was a convincing win. And that was the game where Drake London stepped out at the 2-yard line right as time expired in the half. It should have had another score, which would have really put that game on ice. They already won by multiple scores, 24-14. It wasn't even as close as the score indicated. Before that, they beat the Commanders. They beat the Vikings early in the season. But this week, they lost against the 49ers. You go back a few weeks before that, Marcus, a 30-0 loss against the Carolina Panthers. This is the biggest roller coaster team in the NFL right now. Which version of the Falcons is going to show up? And I think that that's kind of the case when you have a really young offense, the way that they do. Michael Penix, I was not impressed by in week 7. He had ended up with a 29.7 pass or QBR, 6.3 yards an attempt. He left a lot of meat on the bone, I thought, in that game against San Francisco, who was playing really banged up. And with their backup quarterback, you lose by 2 scores in that game. What do you make of this Atlanta Falcons team, Marcus? We know that they've got some young talent to work with there, but are they there yet?
They're kind of like our AFC or our NFC version of Pittsburgh, where they can be just so Jekyll and Hyde depending on the week. And they play Miami this week at home. I think they're going to kill Miami, right? And then they're going to play New England on the road the following week. And I think that's going to be a really tough outing where this is a team that just seems destined to be in that 8 and 9 win range every single year. They were there last year. They were competing for the NFC South division title going into week 17. I think this Falcons team is our good, bad team this year. I don't think this is a contender team, but they're not bad either. They're going to be incredibly watchable. And Tommy, you look at the middle part of their schedule. They play the Panthers, the Saints, the Jets in a 3-week stretch. They could win all 3 of those games. They could lose all 3 of those games because I just don't trust them on a week-to-week basis. I think in the NFC, where you have so many well-rounded teams, I have a hard time seeing Atlanta getting to anything more than 8 wins. And so for that reason, I think they're pretenders.
Yep, sitting on a 3-3 record. Even with the Buccaneers' recent loss, they're still at 5-2. I think that they're pretty easily a better team. They're going to come away with that division, if I had to guess, and it's just going to be way too crowded in that NFC wildcard race to believe that the Falcons, I think, are going to fight their way back. I just don't see it happening this year. Maybe next year. Let's move on, Marcus, from our contenders and pretenders. Let's talk about a disappointing rookie this year. And I, again, can't say that it's all his fault. We know how much a running back success is tied to the offense and to the offensive line, to the guys in front of him. Ashton Jeanty, Las Vegas Raiders. You're talking about the 6th overall pick in the draft here. You expect that guy to have a massive impact. And we've seen it before in the past. We've seen Bijan have pretty big rookie impact, didn't get as many carries as we thought, but some of the other guys that are early first round draft picks, they come in, they explode right away. That has not been the case with Ashton Jeanty. And let me just throw some numbers out here for you, Marcus. I think he's 31st in, oh man, I just had these all. I got them right here. Ashton Jeanty is 31st in running back success rate at 45.9%. He's 29th in yards per carry among qualifying running backs. And he is 73rd in EPA per play among all running backs who have carried the ball this year. So a little caveat there. Just not what we'd expect out of this guy who looks so explosive at Boise State. Now, you're talking about a tremendous jump in the level of competition from Mountain West to the NFL. Has that impacted him, Marcus? And how much of the blame do you put on the offensive line? And we gotta ask the question, needs to be asked. Did the Raiders make a mistake with this selection?
First and foremost, yeah, they made a mistake. And we, you and I were on this when they drafted him. This was a Raiders team that wasn't ready to compete. But when you hire Pete Carroll, who is the oldest head coach in the league, you bring in Chip Kelly, who's one of the oldest offensive coordinators in the league. You have Tom Brady basically running everything behind the scenes. They wanted to win right away. That's why they traded for Geno Smith. They thought this would be the move that could help them be a competitive and competent franchise right away. And that's just not the way the Raiders should have acted, because they're not. They're the distant 4th team in the AFC West. They don't have an offensive line. They've totally mismanaged that unit. Jackson Powers Johnson, who they drafted in the 2nd round last year, he was benched this week for Alex Kappa. It seems like he might be somebody that the Raiders outright cut in upcoming weeks. They've done a terrible job of improving that offensive line. DJ Glaze is the right tackle. He's been a disaster. Colton Miller, he's out with a high ankle injury and a knee sprain. They needed to rebuild this team from the inside out, not draft a running back. As for Jeanty specifically, I think he's still, I mean, you can see the talent. There's no doubt. But I do think it's worth remembering, like, this is a Mountain West running back coming from Boise State, whereas you had some other running backs in this class, like Quinshon Judkins, who's on an also equally bad offense with a bad offensive line, who's significantly outproducing him. And it shouldn't be a surprise, because Quinshon Judkins dominated at Ohio State for a national championship team. I made the quote on, or the question on Twitter, like, if the Raiders offered the Browns Ashton Jeanty for Quinshon Judkins, I don't think there's any way that the Browns would trade Judkins for Jeanty right now. And I think that kind of just goes to show you, maybe don't draft these running backs that early unless you think they're a absolute can't miss player.
Yeah, I feel for the guy because he came into a rough situation. He's been hit a ton behind the line of scrimmage, and it's so hard to get going when that happens. I think he's really talented. I think he is one of the best running backs that I've ever graded before, Marcus, in terms of his draft profile coming out. The problem is you are only a product of what is going on in front of you. And unfortunately, it's very bad. Maybe Judkins would have more success because he did not come from such a low quality of play in college. He would have been a little bit more used to what's happening right now. But the person we got to blame here, and we got to look at the franchise as a whole, when you hire a coach in his 70s, what do you expect? He's going to want to win now. And he thought that Pete Carroll thought that getting a player like Ashton Jeanty would help them to be able to enforce the run game and kind of win the way that he did when he was in Seattle. That has not been the case at all. It was a really bad team building philosophy to take a running back this early in a loaded running back class. By the way, you could have talked about 2nd, 3rd, 4th round. There was a collection of guys. My goodness, look at what Cam Scadaboo is doing for the Giants right now. You talk about a 3-round difference between those two running backs. The Giants wouldn't trade Scadaboo, not after what he's done. So that's where we are right now.
Yeah, and I think it's a good reminder too. Like, if you look, history matters when it comes to the draft, right? Because it gives us some good ideas of what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And if you look at, like, I guess it would be the non-power 4 running backs right now that have been drafted in round 1, like Ryan Matthews, I think, went to Fresno State. Rashad Penny went to San Diego State. Now, Jeanty was a better prospect than both of those guys, but you can go through the list, and more often than not, those guys end up getting overdrafted. And you look at a lot of the best running backs in the league, and they play at these elite schools, whether that's Saquon Barkley at Penn State or Bijan Robinson at Texas. I mean, go through the list. Almost all of your top running backs came from these elite schools. Jahmyr Gibbs played at Alabama, right? I think drafting a running back from Boise State at 6, just again, hindsight's always 2020. It just feels like such a risky pick. Now, if Chicago would have done it at 20, I think that would have made a lot more sense because their team was ready to go. Not for the Raiders.
Yeah, when you have roster holes and you don't resemble a team that's ready to compete right now, I take a huge issue with taking a running back that early. I would reserve that only for elite prospects, which I do think that Jeanty checked that box, but also organizations who are ready to compete for a championship right now. If you don't check both of those boxes, you shouldn't be drafted that high. And I think what's most egregious, Marcus, that we kind of already pointed out, it would be one thing if Jeanty was like the clear cut, like only running back in this class, then everything else was kind of trash. There were so many quality running backs in this class. This was one of the best running back classes, if not the best class I've ever seen before in terms of the depth and the talents you're getting throughout the class. They could have taken one later on, and you could have reserved that pick for a trench player, someone who could have been a cornerstone piece.
Real quick, before we move on, though, how many of these running backs? You're right. Like, this was viewed as an all-time great running back class, and we're only 7.
I know they're not performing well.
I know.
Yes.
Well, I would say there's really 2 that have played well. It's Judkins and Scadaboo, and Hampton. I think Hampton started to get better as the year went on, so I want to include him. But like the rest of those guys, whether it's Travion Henderson, who has been a massive disappointment, or RJ Harvey, or Caleb Johnson, it's been a little up and down so far for this class.
They have. It's been real finicky with those guys, and we'll see. I mean, obviously, we're a third of the way or so into their NFL careers. I think it still could be a very good running back class. And even if those guys miss, Marcus, you already pointed out a couple guys who I think are already on their way to being special running backs, and that's Judkins and Scadaboo. So I think you're at least getting maybe 2 Pro Bowl caliber running backs out of this class, with the potential, obviously, to get more. If the Raiders can fix their offensive line issues, maybe we can be talking about this selection a year from now and saying, well, look how good Jeanty is. But right now, the pick looks terrible. And it was a bad philosophy to begin with. We both agreed on that, but it looks as bad as ever when you're not getting anything and you're getting a lack of efficiency out of the 6th overall pick. All right, Marcus, let's talk about Justin Fields really quick here, because boy, has he been a big topic and in the spotlight around the NFL the last 2 weeks for all of the wrong reasons. In week 6, Marcus, he finished the game with negative net 10 passing yards after taking 55 sack yards and passing for 45 yards. There you get the negative net 10 yards last week. This week, 46 yards in the passing game, took 3 sacks, I believe, for 21 yards. And so he only ended up with 20-some net passing yards this week before getting benched for Tyrod Taylor. Not that he was much better, but it's like, this is where we are with Justin Fields right now. And I, as a Steelers fan who watched him the first 6 weeks of last year, I was somewhat optimistic. I knew that I didn't think he would ever be there as a passer, but you wondered if you could get enough out of him and he could do enough with his legs to be a quality starting quarterback. That has not been the case at all. If anything, he's shown us that he's not even playing the right position.
He's got 3 games this year where he didn't even reach 50 passing yards. They played 6 games. I mean, it's over for Justin Fields. And whether Tyrod Taylor is an upgrade or not, honestly, it doesn't matter, because the Jets receivers and the offense, they don't believe in Fields, and he's not the long-term answer. So like, you play anybody else, anybody that you think can get the receivers the ball, just to develop guys like Mason Taylor and Garrett Wilson and Arian Smith. I mean, anybody that has any shot to be on this roster in 2026, they're welcoming a quarterback change. I think the days of Fields being a starting quarterback are over. I do think he can transition into being a fine backup, where you bring him in, you run him 15, 16 times, you throw some, high percentage passes, and that's it. But at some point, the upside just stops mattering, because we're into year 6 right now, and the upside's all gone for Fields. So it's over for Fields. I think we're going to see the Jets announce Tyrod Taylor as the starting quarterback at some point today. And honestly, Tommy, I won't be surprised if Fields is outright released or traded. within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, that contract's not looking so good anymore, Marcus. And I mean, this has to be his last stop as a starting quarterback, and maybe he'll bounce around the league as kind of that polarizing backup that can give you a little bit of splash. I don't even know if that's guaranteed. You probably want someone that can come in and run your offense a little bit better than that.
But I do think there's going to be some situations like whether it's backing up Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson. Like I think he could be better than Cooper Rush.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's the bar you're trying to clear now. It's like, hey, am I better? Am I a better backup than Cooper Rush? The days of him being a week one starting quarterback, like it's never going to happen.
Yeah, and ironically, there's a wild stat with Fields. I can't remember off the top of my head, but the more he rushes for, the less chance they have to win the game because a lot of times it's just in garbage time and you're breaking off these big chunk plays. But
I think the stat for him is he is now 0-24 when the opponent scores more than 21 points, which shows you
crazy.
When you have Fields as your quarterback, your offensive output's pretty low.
It certainly is. Marcus, and we got to get to, before we're off for today's show, the trade candidate that has suddenly popped up as of today. And I want to ask you about this, how much truth there is. I think it was Trey Wingo that put it out there. The Dallas Cowboys were talking to the Las Vegas Raiders about Max Crosby, second team All-Pro, Pro Bowl pass rusher Max Crosby, been in the Defensive Player of the Year race before. The Cowboys traded Micah Parsons away. Is Crosby a name that the Raiders would actually consider trading away?
I think the answer is yes. Now, they've been very reluctant to do this over the last couple of years because they viewed him as a cornerstone, but he's 28 years old. I think the Raiders are staring down the barrel of a total rebuild, and the thought of getting a first-round pick plus to maybe go after the next franchise quarterback, rebuild their offensive line is something worth examining. I don't think the Cowboys have talked to the Raiders yet about Max Crosby. I think they've kind of thrown out some ideas of, hey, if Crosby were available, what would it cost? What would it cost to get a player like him? I am going to predict that Crosby gets traded. I think there's going to be a lot of teams opening to trading for Max Crosby that are in these championship windows, whether it's the 49ers who lost Nick Bosa, whether the Eagles who just brought back Brandon Graham. I do think Max Crosby ends up getting dealt before the deadline.
And Marcus, what would be just the most wild turn of events is if Cowboys got him for, let's say, not quite half the price of the Micah Parsons deal, but what if they pull a heist in the end? What if they get Max Crosby, Kenny Clark, and are able to hold on to one of their first round picks? Who ends up winning that deal now? Do Cowboys look smart for everything they've done?
I mean, it makes it's easier to rationalize the trade of Micah Parsons if you do that, which is why I think maybe Dallas is exploring this.
All right. What do you guys think? Let us know in the chat below. We go live on the Stacking the Box podcast every single Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. You can follow Marcus on X at Marcus_Mosher. You can follow me on X at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Steel Curtain or Stacking the Box podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube. You can follow my written content on steelcurtain.com. You can follow Marcus's written work on the Fansided NFL Network. Be sure to check out fansided.com for all of your daily sports news and opinions. And thanks again for listening to Stacking the Box.